I'm going to talk to you about feminine leadership, and not why it's just a good idea, but absolutely necessary right now. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a little pop quiz. And I'm going to give you 3 scenarios that have happened over the last couple of years. First one is in 2010, a young man named Mohammed Al-Azizi stepped up to the front of the municipal building in his small town, 200 miles south of his country's capital, and he burned himself to death. He did that in protest because he had had his work taken away from him. He had no options. He'd been beaten. He had been refused a hearing, and it was his last option. He was completely without any options, and that's what he did. He was one guy in the middle of Tunis, a small country that had no power, no means, and he changed the world for the Arab countries. He started the Arab Spring. And that spring has continued to grow till today. In the 3 months preceding his self-immolation, 3 countries completely, the regimes of 3 countries completely fell. And the Arab uprising continues to rage today, and things like women's voting rights in Saudi Arabia and a civil war in Syria are all outfalls of that. 2010, one guy, one act. Okay, that's one. Second one is in 2008, the Freddie Mac, the company that buys and sells loans for houses, said that they were no longer going to accept subprime loans. And when they quit, within a few months, many of the major financial institutions in the United States had completely fallen apart, ended their business lives. The entire economy of the U.S. fell apart, and then the economy of the world fell apart. Any country that did not have a strong economy going into that situation also fell apart. Greece completely lost its economy and is in the throes of rebuilding now. Iceland, who was in the middle, arguably, of the subprime loan activities, had to rebuild, and the good footnote on that is they actually crowdsourced a new constitution and have started rebuilding themselves. The third one is starts in 1998. There was a little show called Will and Grace that came out in 1998. It's the first time that a positive characterization of a gay character was in the media, and the show was about the gay character. During that time, it was not a good time for gay people or the LGBT community. It was a pretty horrible time. Don't Ask, Don't Tell was in place, and there just wasn't a lot of room to be that and be out in the world. In 2000, New Hampshire voted for civil unions. Thank you, Sam. I was going to civil liberties. I knew I was going in the wrong direction. Civil unions. And most of the legislators that voted for civil unions were thrown out of office. Another 4 years went by before Massachusetts legalized gay marriage, and then another 4 years before Connecticut. So in 8 years, 2 states legalized gay marriage. In the preceding 3 years, another several states legalized gay marriage, taking it up to a total of 7, and then there's also District of Columbia. So that was it. And Don't Ask, Don't Tell ended in 2011. Suddenly in 2012, all hell broke loose. Within 18 months, as of today, there are 7 additional states that have legalized gay marriage, and the president has come out in favor of gay marriage, and the Supreme Court has ruled favorably on gay rights in two cases. And the population of the United States is now far leaning in favor of gay rights and gay marriage. That happened in 18 months. There are three completely different examples. They came from completely different worlds. What are the things that connect them? What are the things that pull them together? And I'll just do this really quickly because I know I don't have a lot of time. So the things that pull them together is certainly there was a large mass of grassroots people that really wanted something to change. They were impassioned. They used social media, and the things happened radically quick. Literally, the Arab Spring, the day before it happened, nobody could even get their heads around that those kinds of regimes, those strong-arm regimes would drop. And they did. Nobody predicted any of this happening the way it happened. Very powerful. And why is that? Why did that happen that way? Well, I believe that we are at the nexus, at a point of transition between the world that was and the world that we are becoming. That world that was, and I'm going to call it World 1.0, is a world that was very isolated, that enemies were at the door of any entity, whether you were a country, business, you name the thing, that everybody was bad except those that were inside, and those that were inside had a very specific job. In World 2.0, the world that we are becoming, the world doesn't have an us and them, it only has a we. The world that we're becoming is very interconnected and tied together. And I believe what's happening, and I believe why we're seeing these things happen so fast and hard, is because we've come to a critical mass where all those things are tied together. They are all becoming part of a bigger system. And when I say system, I don't mean system like business system or process. I mean system like ecosystem. Like something that works together, that something happens in one part of the system and the whole system feels it. So what you do impacts the rest of the people in your system. And what the rest of the people in your system are doing will impact you. So there is no way to be us and them in that kind of structure. So that's what I believe is happening. So what does that mean for us? So if we're living in a world that still has a lot of world 1.0, and we're becoming World 2.0, what does that mean? Well, let's explore that a little bit. The Dalai Lama, the Dalai Lama, as those of you that were in the keynote speech heard, said in 2009, the Western woman will save the world. Now, I believe that, and not only because I'm half of the Goddess Collective Leadership, and I'm also the co-founder of the Feminine Leadership Academy. I believe that because statistics tell us that. John Garamezzo, in his book, The Athena Doctrine, has he calls it the opening of the age of a world that is more social, interconnected, and transparent. And he's based his book on a study he did of 64,000 people. He surveyed 64,000 people in 13 countries and asked them a lot of questions about feminine leadership. And the statistics show, I can give you a whole bunch of them, like in Japan, 79% of the people there, not just women, 79% of the people there are concerned about how men act and behave. That 78% of the world is concerned about the power that corporations have. And that 2/3 of the world believe that, in the words of the author, they believe that the world would be better off if men thought more like women. It's very powerful. So that's the data talking. That's the data. I'm not making that up. It's not my opinion. That's the data talking about what's happening in the world today. So let me talk a little bit more about World 1.0 and World 2.0 and what that is. So World 1.0, like I said, was in isolation. That a lot of competition, it was all based on competition. It was all based on scarcity. We have our stuff, they have their stuff, we probably want their stuff, we're going to go get it. And leadership was developed in the world of 1.0. And that leadership was developed on the premise of military intervention, political machinations, and religious dominance. And in the world of 1.0, the leadership was developed with that as the fabric of leadership. So everything that you read in traditional leadership, and I've read a lot about traditional leadership, is based on those premises, that there's a competition that you're inside of, and that there's an us and them that we're dealing with. So if we are now working in a leadership 2.0, or we're working into a leadership 2.0, what does that mean for us? That means that we are now working in a world that is interdependent. There is no us and them, there's only we. And that we has to bring together a world that whatever you do is going to impact me and vice versa. So how do we work within that? Well, let me talk about 5 major trends that I've seen shaping over the last couple of years that I believe are putting in place that infrastructure that is causing this World Point 2 shift to happen. So first, politics is becoming more permeable. When I was a kid in the Cold War, we used terms like Iron Curtain, Bamboo Curtain, talking about how we couldn't get into different countries, that we had no insight. Today, those countries are business stops. That's where we do business, that's who we're engaged with. In today's world, if you're isolated, you fail. If you look at, you only have to look at North Korea to see what happens with a country in isolation. So there's a lot more political permeability in the world now, and people engaging with each other to make things happen. Inroads into religious unification and inclusion. So I just read an article in the New York Times this last week that talked about a minister in Linwood, Washington, who holds services using every doctrine known to man. And his doctrine includes no us versus them. It's only services and only in the service of other human beings. We're seeing a lot of that. The fact that the Boy Scouts just voted to include gays in the Boy Scouts is another example of that inclusion that's happening right now. So that's religious inclusion. The next one is burgeoning information availability. You can get any information about anything at your fingertips almost immediately. If you spend any time on the internet, you can pull in any data you want, from news of the day, from news in the raw, from bloggers, to analytics on anything that you're interested in. So whereas this information used to be held by a few people who did the analysis, you can do that analysis yourself. You can make choices yourself. Information is infinitely available, and the other side of that is your voice is infinitely expandable in that arena. In other words, the work of setting up a blog or setting up a Twitter feed or whatever you do is a work of minutes, and if you're interesting at all or you're entertaining at all, you can develop a following. So really, it's saying that you are the one that gets to choose how much your voice is out in the world. Okay? The next one is the growing ambiguity of the business entity. When I was a kid, businesses were pretty much country-based. They were very defined. Their playing field was very defined. And their competition was very defined. You knew exactly what you were dealing with. Today, businesses change overnight. They're completely developed on coalitions, which change to meet the need of the business objective. Business objectives are changing as opportunities come up, which are at light speed today. And just as an example, the company I'm working for today, we're based internationally. Everything happens all over the world, and we have coalition partners. We have collaboration partners that we have to work with to do everything, and they change every day, and we have to be ready to do that. And finally, the ascension of feminine leadership. I already talked about some of the data from John Garzomo's book. What it's saying is there's a big demand, there's a high demand for IQ, or excuse me, EQ as well as IQ. That's an emotional quotient as well as intelligence quotient. So really necessary at this point to have feminine leadership as part of that. So those are the 5 big trends. What does that imply? Well, that implies that first, inclusion is in. Inclusion is in. So 9/11 is a good example of this. There was a real retraction from whatever Muslims were and whatever that other was. It was very xenophobic. But what happened right behind that was people got curious and wanted to know more and wanted to include people in. And you'll see that all over the place. That, like I said, we made up us and them, and now we have a we to deal with. So inclusion is in. The second one is that the power of grassroots is growing. So the grassroots we, the power base is shifting over to the grassroots. Right now, there is no, whereas power used to be all held in small places because of the internet and because of the growing connections, technology connections between people, there's no longer that power base that holds everything down. All of the examples that I used of the things that have changed really rapidly over months all happened by people on Twitter feeds and texts and messages between each other. They didn't happen by any big movement or any large funded activity. They were us. Okay, the next thing that we should note in this New World Order is that it's never been a better time to create a movement. You can create a movement. You can get on the internet, you can tell people what your form is, why you're doing it, and pull people together really quickly. It happens all the time. Leslie and Jenny did that to make the WOW conference, and you can see what this has done. So today is a good day to start your movement if you've got something in mind. Don't wait. The next one is, and this is from the examples. Change is happening in a way with whack-a-mole surprises. You just don't know where it's going to come up, when it's going to come up, or how it's going to come up. So you can't be completely linear. You have to be thinking from a holistic perspective. And if you're not, you're going to miss the signs. And not only that, but when you're in the middle of doing things, some big surprise will come up. I guarantee with this New World Order, it will happen. And I think, did I get them all? Oh, last one. The era of the superhero is dead. What do I mean by that? We used to, because it was hard to get information, power bases were where they were, we used to look for some superhero to come save the day. Today, there is no such thing because information has been democratized, because we are all working in coalitions. It is the era of the common hero. You, me, everyone else. All you have to do is step up, and you can be a hero locally, or if you want to, you can be one globally. So those are the big impacts that I see. That means there's a huge cry for Leadership 2.0, that leadership that is going to support the world that we are becoming. Now, we know that Leadership 1.0 hasn't gone away, because there is still a world 1.0 out there. There is still competition, there is still tragedy, there is still things happening out there that require a certain kind of leadership that is valuable. What I'm talking about is as 2.0 becomes the world of the day, we need leaders that can manage at the 2.0 level, right? And that means we have to develop a leadership that is fully engaged, that brings people to the table, that is leaders creating leaders, that is nurturing and compassionate, and has a way to form coalitions and pull people together. And if we have that in place, we can manage in a world 2.0. Now, where does that come from? Well, all the things I just described are feminine wisdom, right? Now, I'm a transsexual woman. I lived a lot of years in the 1.0 arena, in 1.0 leadership. I authored some of it. I was deeply involved in it. And I'm also, as a woman, deeply involved in the development of Leadership 2.0. So I have a unique perspective on leadership. So Marta Marie and I are all about creating a body of work that supports women in becoming. and becoming the leaders they want to be and becoming the people they want to be. And we invite you to step into your leadership and become a common hero. Thank you.